That sounds awesome.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, Brandon Sheard, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I've kind of watched you and your wife and your family from afar. You were a little closer here a few years ago on Vashon Island. Our farm is just in Carnation, just outside of Redmond, northeast King County,
Yep.
and we have 26 acres. And we raise beef and pigs and chickens, and drew a ton of inspiration and just good old fashioned know how and knowledge from you and your wife and all the great tools. We've been members of your Farmstead Meatsmith online community. We've never attended a class in person, which is a bummer, but we've learned so much from the wealth of resource that you guys have worked so hard to put up at farmsteadmeatsmith.com, and all the emails and all the different things. And so you've been a real inspiration to my wife and I both, on the farming side and on the faith side. So I'm super honored that you're willing to be a guest on our Farm Table podcast.
Oh yeah, it's a real pleasure. Thanks for even reaching out.
Well, I love it. And one of the cool ancillary benefits of being a part of your online community is I've reconnected with people that I knew years ago that my
Really?
sons, yeah, played youth football with. And then it was kind of through Facebook. Hey, I noticed, are you the Mike Smith that, yada, yada. And yeah, that's me. Oh, wow. I see you're on, with Brandon and Lauren and Farmstead Meatsmith and all that. And so anyway, this family, the Kreitzers, they live, no joke, they probably live 2 miles from us. We've had them over. We've killed lambs with them. We've celebrated, some holidays. They've invited us to the big Heidelfest celebration at St. Edward's Park, celebrating all things German Christian heritage as well as drinking beer. And
That's
it's been a lot of
also
fun.
Christian heritage.
Right, right. Anyway, I've just like I said, I'll probably gush here for a second, but so much inspiration, so much knowledge, tactical and principle. And so, what I wanted to do in our conversation today was ask several different questions that may not seem like they're connected, but I think that our listeners and whatnot will find that there's definitely a thread of consistency and continuity through it all. So if you're up for it, I'd like to just kind of jump right in.
That's awesome. Let's do it.
Okay. We're both talkers, we're both English majors. But I think it'll be fun. I went to the University of Washington, but what I wanted to first hear, and I don't know that I've fully gathered it from some of the past podcasts in history. How did you and or your wife, not only get into farming, but really your faith? It sounds like it's been a journey, to put it lightly. And take a few minutes and kind of describe it all in one section here, if you could.
Sure. Yeah, so we grew up in God-fearing homes. So we grew up as Protestants, and I think I might have described myself as like a reformed Protestant. I went to a good tiny little Protestant college for my undergrad, where I majored in English, and I focused on literature, which means I got to read John Calvin and Martin Luther, and but I definitely put most of my focus on Shakespeare and John Milton and the Renaissance English poets. And it was after that, it was when I started graduate school at California State University of Northridge, which is a great asphalt concrete megalith in the middle of Southern California.
Right.
And It was interesting. I had actually, that's kind of a sidebar, but I had in my Christian school, the little school that I went to for undergrad, I read all of Karl Marx. And so it was actually really great preparation for getting to this very secular graduate program where everything was Marxist, everything. And I was like, oh, I know where this comes from. This all has a source. And so it was actually during that time when I was finishing up graduate school that I met my wife, Lauren. And we it was great. We met in San Diego. She was studying in graduate school theology and psychology. And she was the one who was reading Catholics. I came from a Protestant background where we, I would say that we were pretty antithetical and anti-Catholic, but also not in like a lazy way. We just wrote it off. We just never even thought about it or read anybody with ST before their name. We just immediately, ignored it. But she had read some Catholics and at a Protestant school. And so it was through getting to know her and that kind of opened my eyes. And it sounds very silly, but I started reading some of the saints. I'm like, oh, these guys aren't as dumb as I thought, in my hubris, of course, it's so silly. But and then it was really through some health issues that Lauren had and that caused us to explore what I know now was just the natural order of things, the way that our bodies work, the way that nature works to supply what our bodies need for health and a sufficiency of bodily goods. And so we were kind of together pursuing just health, which and the best way to see that it seemed to do that was to go in accord with our nature rather than against it. And so it's very basic. And so we just kind of were pursuing that. And then I had enough formation from my parents to know that marriage is a natural good and it is ordered towards the procreation of children and the education of children. And so that is what we pursued. We, within a year of meeting, we were engaged, and very soon thereafter we got married. And it was really with the birth of my first son, our firstborn, Wallace, who is 15 now.
Wow.
And like 9 inches taller than me. He's a very tall young man. And it was with his birth that I started to feel more poignantly the deficiencies in my own walk with God. And it was really the deficiencies in my philosophy. I held a lot of contradictory notions, and then the deficiencies in practice. I was seeing that it was not sufficient for it to be well, it's just me and God, and I'm not gonna really I find myself not going to church at all. And I could see that was too sneaky a position for my concupiscence, that I was educated enough to make the Bible say what I needed it to say, and to convince myself that I'm doing the right thing. And so and maybe even persuade others too, to like follow along with me, and that to me felt like I would like something that can prevent that can rein me in. I don't want to be my own authority. I don't want to be my own judge, because I know I have defects and contradictions in my own thinking. So I actually remember it was I was sitting down during my undergrad. This was a prior experience, but I was reading John Calvin. I was reading the Institutes of Christian Religion, and kind of a source text really for my theology and my faith life. And I read this line where he says, "We hold this testimony of the Spirit superior to that of reason." And that kind of put me into a mode of interrogation where I was going to question, where I'm coming from with my own philosophy and theology. And so I said, okay, well, how do I know as an evangelical that the testimony of the Spirit is true, that this burning in the bosom, as the Mormons might say, or this interior conviction of the truth of this whole system of belief, how do I know that it is in fact true? And then it's like, well, you have the testimony of the Spirit, the internal witness of the Holy Spirit. And I was like, well, how do I know that? And it was, well, the Scripture tells me so. And then if you ask that question again, you get the answer, well, how do you know that the Scripture is telling you the right thing, that it is true? And it's because, well, the Spirit bears witness interiorly. And so just in my own conception, I noticed, oh, that's pretty cyclical. That's not reaching out beyond my own brain to land on something solid. And so I had a gap in my knowledge that was precisely, I always say it was precisely the void that was the shape of the perennial tradition of the Catholic Church. And so it was really, I was beginning to see those defects. And then it was through a friend uh, right soon after we got married, right after Wallace was born, that just invited us to a Catholic mass. And then even after that, invited us to pray the Rosary, which is a scary thing for a Protestant to do.
I do
And
want
so,
to talk a little bit more about that here a little bit later. So we'll make
yeah,
sure we pin that, come back to it. But keep going. This is great.
yeah, definitely. And so I blame Our Lady for our conversion, because it was a good talk by another Catholic that we attended that helped tear down a lot of my defenses and my emotional reaction to the Mother of God. And he clarified a lot of things. And it was actually on the way home from that talk that one of our friends boldly, courageously, and in charity said, "Hey, why don't we pray a rosary?" And so we did, and it was it's just the way that Our Lady works. It was like totally miraculous, but it was all interior. It was all the defenses just crumbling down, and the consolation of peace coming in, which is the tranquility of order. And so when that started to come into our lives, realize it had its source in the Catholic Church. And so that was kind of the spiritual journey. We came in, we got my 2-year-old son baptized, and then his little baby brother at the time got baptized, and we came into the church. Lauren and I did all at the same time. Thanks be to God. We weren't divided about that. And then it really was, if that's kind of what was going on the spiritual level, it was the same move. We were also moving to the natural order of the land and to farming, because there too we found that there is peace. There's the tranquility of order when we go with the flow of the natural law and of the essence of each created thing as we see it manifest. We can discern the nature of a pig and a tree and a blade of grass in the soil. And when we're actually docile and receptive to that, and we work with those systems rather than against them, you get peace again. And so we maybe not even we connected them a little bit. And I think at the beginning it was connecting that natural order with the supernatural order and the divine law with the natural law. Those kind of converged for us back then in the sacrifice of the Mass. And it was really in the Eucharist, where our Lord is present in the bread and the wine. And it was, oh wow, here is literally the meeting of nature and grace. This is where the divine touches down. And in the Mass, you're in heaven and on Calvary at the same time. And for us especially, it was especially rich for us, coming from a Protestant background that was kind of, at least my experience, going to Christian colleges and everything, it's very cerebral. And it was very much something that I worked out on a conceptual, abstract level. And so even the idea of genuflecting, of kneeling, of worshiping our Lord with the mind and the body. I mean, it sounds so simple, it's so basic, but I saw, oh, this calls to the whole person. This is the Catholic Church it's reaching out to my body soul composite, the whole person. There's no part of this that I have to bracket off as not applying. So yeah, that's kind of a rambling summary, but that's definitely where they met. It was on the altar, the natural law and the divine law for us in the Catholic Church.
That's awesome. My experience was a little different. I kind of grew up in that traditional, we'll call it Irish Catholic American, culture. And I'd call it kind of culturally no Irish Catholic. Catholic school, literally, or the school is St. Patrick's Catholic School in Spokane. We were the Shamrocks. Our plaid was green. And then as I got into high school and then as a young adult in college, and I went to the University of Washington. So talk about Marxism.
Yeah.
Um, and it was from 92 to 96. So it was just as the Soviet Union was crumbling and all that, but boy, the philosophy and teachings of Marxism and everything else were all over that campus. But on the spiritual side, I gravitated towards more of an evangelical style church, the kind of non-denominational. Now I call them kind of the flat panel TV churches, right? You got the skinny jeans and the fog as you worship, and it's got a sweet rock band. And I do believe that these guys love God, and they're doing what they want to do, or what they feel like God wants them to do to reach people. And that was what I gravitated to as a youth minister. But fast forward, as I had my own children, and then we made decisions to put the kids, for the most part, into Catholic school as well. We talked about homeschooling. We didn't. We ended up not going that direction, but part of it was because I wanted the because I went to a Jesuit high school. Okay, let me say it that way. And the Jesuits tend to teach social justice right stuff and
Yeah.
all that. And I have I struggle a little bit with some of it, but the part that I like was the definition of community was outside the four walls of the school or even the church. And I appreciated that. And that's what I wanted the kids to see, was that the world in which we live in is kind of out there. You got to work, uh, have a strong relationship with God internally to allow you to have an impact and be a witness or be salt and light or any of the things into the world. So at least, I mean, that was a decision that we kind of made, and that's kind of where we went. So here we go, kind of almost full circle back to wanting to kind of reconnect at a different level, with my Catholic, I would even say, heritage. I mean, I was an
Mhm.
altar boy. I did all the things. I went through the sacraments. But I wanted more. And I think I struggled as a young man, thinking that I could connect with the Lord in the same way, um, than I could with some of my more Protestant, leaning church experience and things like that. And I don't think that anymore. I think that as an adult, and I want to kind of jump into something else here on that note, of because you mentioned the Rosary, is meditation and taking time to say prayers over and over again. I remember some of my Protestant friends reminding me of this one scripture, right, in Matthew, that talks about vain repetitions, and all
Yeah.
that. And I'm like, bro, chill. You don't need to bash the Lord's Prayer or whatever, because you somehow
Right.
think that you can extemporaneously do a better job at connecting with God than a prayer that Jesus himself taught us to pray. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'd love for you to comment on that, on the Rosary, on the liturgy, on meditation, and I would say even some of the rhythm of that, is how we can connect, reconnect. I love the word. Um, what's I'm missing it all of a sudden, but renew. Renew
Yeah.
each week or each mass or each church service. Renew our faith, renew our commitment. Anyway, comment on that if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think that the rosary, at least for us, and the mass, they're the center of our family life. Absolutely. Unquestionably. We moved across the country so that we could make it to mass every day. Um, we living on Vashon, which is wonderful and beautiful. It was a 2-hour commute to get to a reverent mass because we had to take the ferry boat.
Sure.
And so now we're about 13 and a half minutes away, which is awesome. So we can get to the mass every day. And I think that for us, it's always, it's the gradual influence of grace, because that's really what we're after. And that's what comes through the sacraments, specifically the mass, baptism, confirmation, ordination, matrimony, last rites, all the sacraments, they are the ordinary means of grace. And so what they do is at least in the Catholic formulation, grace is not merely unmerited favor, which is kind of how I understood it as a Protestant.
Sure, same.
Yeah, it's actually a created share in the divine life of the most holy Trinity. So it is it's the most real thing. It's not merely a forensic regard or judgment, or lack thereof. It's actually, you get the life of God in you, and it has very specific effects. It enlightens your intellect, it strengthens your will, and it orders your appetites so that you're not a slave to any of your appetites, or allowing your appetite for whatever it might be, food or alcohol or whatever the tempting things, to dominate your will and make you subservient to it. Rather, it realigns you, it reorders you according to your nature, which is to have truth in your intellect, so that your will is guided by that truth and strong enough to order the appetites and pursue the good. And so that is the most literal and real effect of grace, even if you don't feel it. Even if you're at mass or you're praying the rosary and you do not have the interior warmth or that you're used to, that grace is nonetheless real. Thanks be to God. It's not dependent upon our emotional state at that moment. And so when the more we surrender ourselves and seek the life of grace, we find that it's not merely, we have these rituals like the rosary or the holy sacrifice of the mass. And I think it's it's an effect of modernism, where we tend to think of them as sort of a surface imposition upon just ordinary natural life. Here's this ritual and this ceremony with this bells and these incense and these very prescribed movements that the priest does. This is all kind of an artifice, a creation that is imposed upon the natural order, and it's exactly the opposite. And we see this in Christendom of the past, that everything actually flowed from the altar. And that's why they built the churches in the center. It's the tallest building, and everything flowed from the presence of the Lord in the tabernacle.
Well, and
And
to your point, if I could jump in,
yeah,
I think one of my favorite parts about being Catholic and growing up that way is, of all, we'll call it the branches of Christianity for a very oversimplified statement, uh, the Catholics and Catholicism doesn't forget their roots in Judaism, right? In the Hebrews. I mean, you talk about the altar, right? The tabernacle. I mean, that's right out of the book of Exodus, right? That's right out of the Torah. I mean, and so many Protestant types, and we're not here to, sort of bash that or even draw a line in the sand, but tends to forget that our heritage, and maybe not intentionally, but their heritage is in Hebrew, and that sort of thing. And like,
yeah,
to your point about the altar and the tabernacle and the presence of the Lord and the Holy of Holies and even the incense, it's
yes,
all based around, the Torah, right?
yeah. It's all a fulfillment of that, and you're exactly right. It's there's this great line that I heard from a priest where he said, and this is the ancient Hebrew conception of the world. Like, even when you read Genesis in the creation account, it is the construction. All of reality is conceived as a temple itself, and then you go all the way to the end, and it only makes sense if you've been to Catholic liturgy. But you see that even the Apocalypse, it's all liturgy. I mean, in the Mass, we're singing holy, 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 sanctus, 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 straight from the book of Revelation. I said the
Right.
Apocalypse. And it's so the Mass is the thing. This priest said that all of reality is ordered in such a way that the Mass restores and repairs creation, because the main problem with creation, it's not like, our ecological sins or our littering. Those are like mere little symptoms, or our, GMO crops, are raping of the land and everything. The problem is that we have rebelled against the Creator. And the way we restore that relationship, that union, is through Christ, through offering him. That, I mean, that's what happens at the Mass. We are offering Christ to the Father in the same sacrifice as Calvary. And that restores justice abundantly, extravagantly. And just one mass can restore the whole thing if we're disposed to receive the graces that are available to us at that.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. And back to sort of this rhythm of the Mass and the consistent prayers. And again, Rosary is kind of a really good example of that. But what are we doing in that in those situations? I remember as a kid, at least, like my brain was a thousand, it was all over the place, right? I'm a young
Yeah.
boy. I'm like, I can barely pay attention. And now, it's a little different, right? When people would challenge me, I remember over the years about, oh, that's a bunch of, bull or whatever. Like, bro, you telling me that this, Latina woman in, South America is less spiritual than you? You know what I mean? I mean, come on. You
Yeah.
know, to me, it's the message of Jesus, and it's always about the heart, right?
Yeah.
That if our heart is lined up, but I'd like, to hear what are we getting out of that meditation and that, sort of, does that make sense what I'm trying to ask?
Yeah. I mean, it's oddly, you could frame it in a very similar way that, even I used to as a Protestant is it's we are the goal, the final cause of our being, of our existence, is union with God. And that is what the definition of charity is. So it's the love of God. It's loving God. That's it. And that means the uniformity of our will with his will, not necessarily feeling good about it. Again, the emotions can't be the metric of that. And fortunately, the metrics are objective. It's through the sacraments, like we know how to do it, and it happens to us. It's a work of grace. It's not grit your teeth and muster up all your ability, because we're creatures, and not only that, we're rebellious creatures. But just on the level of being a creature, even if you're innocent, you cannot be united with the Creator. That's a different ontological plane. That's way too far. There's no way. That gap is literally infinite. And so it's in the incarnation when the Creator himself became his own creation, and then in the Mass becomes our nourishment. And then we can actually take him in, that we can be united with the Creator if we're disposed to that. So it is all about the love of God, and that's the one thing that will last for all eternity in the liturgy of heaven
What
is,
we're doing there, it was explained to me once, and I believe it is we are aligning ourselves. We're, to your point about being rebellious and really sinful and all those types of things, is by in the Mass, in the liturgy, in some of these prayers that some people would just call, repetition. We are intentionally aligning ourselves with the Spirit of God, with His will, and renewing our mind, renewing our heart, whether it's for the week or for the day or for the, that kind of thing. I mean, was that,
yes.
would
And
you,
I would say he is doing those things to us specifically. It's his act, it's his action. And it happens in so many ways. And our goal is always to cooperate with that work of God as much as we can interiorly. And he's not going to force it either. We can absolutely shut that off and disengage from that union through mortal sin. That's the definition of mortal sin. Is it the willful expulsion of the life of God from you, from out, get it out. I don't want to do this anymore. And so it is the work of God. And I think it definitely ties into the Hebrew conception. And you mentioned how much the Catholic mass is a fulfillment of the old sacrificial system. I mean, in the Mass we're saying, the priest turns around, one of the few times he turns around and he says, Ecce agnus Dei, ecce qui tollis peccata mundi, behold the Lamb of God, behold he who takes away the sins of the world. And it's the whole thing is centered around the sacrifice. And that's like the ordering principle of created being. Because if we're going to be redeemed, if we're going to be saved, we have to love God. And you can't have love without suffering. And you can't have suffering without sacrifice. And so it's a continuum. And that's why the Old Testament system, even with, the slaying of the bull, the slaying of the yearling ram, for the Passover, it's always giving the Lord the best.
Right.
Because it's like David says, I'm not going to offer the Lord something that costs me nothing. When he's offered a bull from someone else, it wasn't even his, to offer to God, it had to actually be a sacrifice, because we only love what we sacrifice for. And that's why that whole motif, and that is what the Mass is. It is re-offering the perfect sacrifice of Christ to the Father, who gave everything, sacrificed everything in love for God, for us.
I love it. I think more people need to hear, that message. Where do we sign up? I mean, that's really good stuff.
Yeah, baptism,
Uh,
go to
right.
Mass.
There you
That's
go. Bang. You mention a lot in your podcasts and different things. Um, and it just comes out of you, I think, just kind of gushes in a way that I'd like you to drill down on. And that's you talk and transition it also into how you guys ended up farming and those and working with animals and things like that. But natural order. I don't know that I've met or heard of anyone use that phrase more than I have you. Now you can tell I listen to your podcast a lot, but and your videos. But kind of drill down on that because it sounds like it's a significant part of your faith and farming journey together.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think that it's only recently that we've tried to articulate it more and more in the past couple years, because we're just being catechized. But I think that there is a deficiency in at least the modern approach to things, our modern worldviews, to regard nature as primitive and unstructured and wild, and random, right? It seems pretty random. And through the struggle for survival, some things bubble to the top and endure for a little bit. But what that totally dismisses is the inherent principle that clearly operates in nature, which you learn the moment you try to grow food or kill a pig. There is a design here. There is a design. And we tend to forget that it's a miracle, and we don't notice it because we're swimming in it all the time. We take it for granted, but everything is comprehensible. A pig is harvestable. It just is. Our plants, if we cooperate with them, they have an internal principle that we have to bring our reason to, and we can actually cooperate with that. We can't just, plow over and, like in a 3D printer, print our food, and although I'm sure we're trying, and just mow over the natural order, right? We actually have to cooperate with it because it has a nature. The created thing has a nature. It has an essence. And that's just I would say that's the pre-modern concept, of reality. And even Aristotle believed this, and St. Thomas Aquinas definitely put higher resolution on it and drilled down into it and made it more comprehensible. But like, you can take a pig, you can take anything, and that thing has a nature. They used to even call it a soul. And not necessarily a soul it's a soul that is tethered to the bodily existence of that animal. It's never going to be separate. So when the body dies, the soul dies. And the other thing you can call it is it's the substantial form. It's literally the formal cause, or like the blueprint, the design of that creature. And it's exhibited in the way that it acts. And we can discern it with our senses. St. Thomas says all knowledge comes through the senses. And I know that sounds simple, and that's because it is. It's so simple and obvious. But so much of modernity now is actually precise. And maybe you only get this if you're, reading more modern philosophy or theorists or something, but those are precisely the simple things that are attacked in our modern way of conceiving of things. Either the nature of a thing, of a human or of a plant or of an animal, either the nature does not exist, and that's just what materialism is, right? It's all just matter. And all of our generalizations are just abstract, arbitrary projections that have no meaning. So nature doesn't exist. Or if it does, if reality does exist, it's imperceivable to our senses, or we can't trust our senses. And that's how you get the whole Cartesian revolution of, he didn't understand refraction. So he puts a stick in water and he sees it bend and he's like, "Oh, I can't trust my eyes. It's a straight stick. Why is it bending?" And then we just launch into this, you can't trust your senses. Knowledge,
Good. It's a good
meaning knowledge
example.
come through it. Yeah. And then you go to Kant and you can just see this slow, kind of beginning this middle of the 18th century, this just descent into stupidness. And it's
Well, and I
so,
think that a big picture, to me, it's this, if I was the devil, this is what I
yeah,
would do, right? I
yeah,
would just slowly erode
yeah,
until people got their mind off of, the order, that God designed this, that there is intelligent design in this world, on this earth, in the universe, and if we line ourselves up with it, we can probably be satisfied literally, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and yet we've tried to know, not meaning to be crass, but kind of bastard, like we've really trying to take control over it and then make it quote better, and nobody wants to admit that ultimately it's making it worse.
yeah, yeah. And it is definitely a failure to see everything as creation. It's the product of a creator, and he, through the nature that he has put in everything, so the soul, that formal cause, that design of each created thing, he is showing us his intent for that thing. He made a pig to root and to be domesticatable, because he intends for it to be done, for that pig to do that. That's his intent. That's the divine intent. And it's very simple, but that's it. It helps establish, the whole natural order of things, which gives us our trajectory. We came from God, and hopefully our end will be in God as well. And you can even think of your own farm as it all has a hierarchy. It all has a hegemony of being. You're the head of your farm. The farm, in a way, is your body, right? It's members of your body. And that's why when your animals cooperate with the order of your homestead and they serve it, they are fulfilling their nature. They're not you know being abused as well. The pig would be so much better off if he were just running around free and not fenced in your yard. It's like, no, exactly wrong. The pig is fulfilled. Look at how fat and happy he is,
That's right.
having a great time. This is his nature. And I think we can only not see the harmony of this order when we are, well, yeah, it becomes harder to see when you are divorced from it in an urban existence. Then you can indulge in more these fantasies, of the just the goodness of a pig is purely wild, undomesticated. And it's only because you're ignorant of the idea of what happens to a pig when it is wild, and you don't know how terrible that existence is and how horrible the death for that pig will be,
Right.
as opposed to the fulfilled existence it will have on your farm.
Well, and I think we have parts of our own country that have feral, hog, problems, right? Where I think there's parts of Texas, and don't quote me on this, but I think you can shoot them from a helicopter. I mean, they're so
Yeah.
desperate because they breed, as we know, so often and for so many. And then, yeah, it's a very violent life that the
Yeah.
feral hog has. And these old spots that are right behind me, I mean, this is a backdrop of our farm, obviously, but literally they're right over there. I mean, they're
Yeah.
as happy as can be. They just created the most beautiful space. And as you know, because you lived in the Pacific Northwest, we don't have the intense heat that you probably have in Oklahoma now, but they can find a cool spot pretty quick. There's lots of trees, there's lots of opportunity, and I don't think they're gonna have one bad day.
Yeah. Right. And it's, that bad day is it's the fulfillment of their nature, that you would have affection for that pig and that it would become bacon for the family table. I mean, that is the pig technically going up on the scale of being. He's ascending the scale of being because you are a rational creature. And through the natural miracle of nourishment, that pig is going to become you through being totally broken down on a molecular level and then keeping your family in good health so that you can all, to the best of your ability and only by the grace of God, ascend to the next level of being as well, which is union with God in heaven.
That
You
is
know,
a good way to do the natural order part. And I would add this, um, beef, right? Beef cattle, um, they have this ability to break down things,
mhm.
pure sunshine, right? They eat grass.
Yeah,
So you've got the greatest source of vitamin D is the photosynthesis of grass, right?
yeah,
And the sun beats down on it, and then they process it in a way, and they can eat a few things that maybe we as humans wouldn't be able to go pick up and eat directly. But through that design of that animal, we can then have the most beautiful cheeseburger or roast or roast, whatever it is,
yeah,
because of what they can do to nourish us. To
yeah.
me, that's same concept as what you're talking about kind of
Absolutely.
elevating even of ourselves in that set, not in an arrogant way,
Yeah.
but in more of a fulfillment, or to your point, in an ordering way.
Yeah. It's just it's just the nature of reality. That's just what it is. It's all hierarchical. And the even on your farm, you think you've got a beef cow at one level of hierarchy where his primary end is to be slaughtered at 2 or 3 years or whatever it is and consumed. But then you get the dairy cow, who is one that lives on your farm longer, right? And it's a perpetual source of this liquid sunlight in the form of milk that can sustain all of the other creatures, including your whole family. And that is an incredible, unbelievable success of domestication, but also elevation of the wild European bovine, right? That was just ranging around. And people say that the what is it, the aurochs, the boss aurochs or whatever, is extinct. It's like, no, it's not. It's just
See,
fulfilled.
it's in my Angus right out here.
Yeah, that's right. It's fulfilled.
The lineage is still here.
That's right.
I love
Yeah.
that. Oh man, good job. I love that stuff. Speaking of beef, one of the things that the media, whoever they are this week, wants to push down our throats is that raising beef and cattle is bad for the environment.
Hmm.
And you've always been so good with words, and you can pull on all kinds of great research that either you've done or you've seen. I mean, talk to us about if someone tells you that consuming beef is bad for the environment, how would you respond to that?
Oh my goodness.
I'm going to get you going here.
Yeah, there's so many ways to go. I would say it's sort of it's a contradiction at its base. It's sort of like saying the environment is a danger to the environment. Like, what are you talking about? The grasses don't work unless they're grazed. And if the grasses aren't growing, we're not creating soil. And if we're not creating soil, we are not growing anything. That whole paradigm only works if you believe that humans who consume beef are an accident. So I think the most pernicious, or an interruption, right, to the natural order, that they actually shouldn't be there. So I think at the root of that argument, it's not actually an ecological argument, because the science is so lame. It's like it's not even worth refuting. It's so lame because and you have experienced this, and so has anyone who's grazed animals, that the bovine enhances the pasture when they are managed with the reason of the farmer, right? It increases fertility, it does not decrease it. So it's totally ridiculous. And there are parts of this planet that cannot be restored to fertility without the beef cow. They're the only ones that can do it. So the scientific argument, the ecological argument is just, it's so overwhelmingly silly and urbanite. But I
Mm.
think at the root of it, the worst part of it is that it is Malthusian. I mean, straight up, because the premise is that domestication is a blight and the burden of, and that human life, human existence on the planet is a burden rather than the final cause. Like all the arrows, all the other creatures are here to be fulfilled by cooperating with us, because we are the image bearers and we are the only creature that brings reason into the equation. And so it's I think at its root, they don't want you to eat beef because they don't want you to procreate and have children, because people are a major threat to the ecological do-gooders out there. And
And
it's not philanthropy, it's the opposite. It's misanthropy.
well, and you said the urbanite, sort of view, if you're in the city, if you're in a condo project in downtown Seattle and you're looking out, I mean, there's a huge disconnect,
Yeah.
right? To where all this food, and everything else comes from. And even if you want to be a vegan, there's still a disconnect because you think it just shows up at the local, even if, co-op or the big grocery store or whatever, you somehow have there's like I don't understand the disconnect,
Yeah.
but it's definitely there, right?
Yeah.
And you can pontificate from looking out that window out of that condo project, and really not have a single clue as to what you're talking about. But that's just an
Yes.
overgeneralization for me. I like what you're saying is that at the core, at the root, you're basically saying that humanity and really all living things for some at some point is a burden to the earth, and that is not, back to your natural order comment, that is
Yeah.
not in line with natural order.
No. Yeah, we got our natural orders from the creator to reproduce and multiply and have dominion over the earth. And that's again, that's not just well, it's true. That's part of the proper functioning of reality itself. That's how the earth works. I got to see this when I went to Europe, where that was how people thought in Christendom, particularly during the Middle Ages. And you can see that way of thinking engraved in stone in the landscape. It's really beautiful, literally in stone, where all of the entire landscape, none of it is wild in Europe, right? It's an old enough country. It has all been domesticated. It's all been turned into that which can produce and sustain human life beautifully. And lo and behold, all the fields are bordered by stone walls, and they're all small, tiny paddocks. They're all like 5 acres. They're tiny. So that rotational grazing is just built into the landscape in stone, and it's been that way for centuries and centuries. And then again, what do you see? Every village has got a steeple, and
Mm-hmm.
it's at the top of the hill, and in the center of the village, and right up front of the church is the marketplace, and then outside of that are the farms. And so it's not, again, it's not just an arbitrary superimposition of some order that we make up. It's like, no, it worked for at least 1,000 years really well, because it accords with reality, with the way that reality works.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Same observation when I was in Europe. Being Irish, Mike, I was in Ireland, and not only was it the stone walls and the paddocks, but of course all those brambleberries that they were put by design as
Yeah.
fences because they couldn't afford to do anything else with it. But that for the same reason, the sheep and the pit, everybody was you can't tell me that an island like Ireland was all this beautiful farmland for its entire existence. No, somebody came in and knocked down a few trees,
Yeah.
brought in some animals, they rooted up some things, they dug out some things, and all of a sudden you have the most beautiful,
Yeah.
land available for all these great animals for people to to raise and then of course ultimately live with and survive.
Yeah, and that, yeah, you have the hedgerow. Even the apparent wild elements of Europe, the hares and the foxes and the bramble where the berries are. Even that is it's treated with human reason by being put in it's the hedgerow,
Right.
and it's maintained. And in the hedgerow, you've got your pollarded trees, where you go in and harvest wood when you need it. And all the woods, all the forests were managed like that. Even pannage was a system of grazing pigs in the forest for all the villagers. And even the city would have a swineherd that was paid by the city to take the pigs out every day, consume acorns in the fall, and bring them back. So even the forest it was all managed. It was all managed for the good of propagating humans, which is a
And
good thing.
it's a really good thing. And that really is, I think at its core, our sense of purpose, right? Is to go forth and multiply, right? Is build a family, a collection of families as a community, neighbor, et cetera, et cetera. And then let's come together and worship and build and relate and things like that. I'm
Yeah.
oversimplifying it. There's obviously a lot more to it, but I think at its core, that's what's I think the war is being fought over.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. And I think that, yeah, an example of one of the weapons of the enemy in that is that ecological argument that you mentioned. It's bad to eat beef. It's an ecological disaster. And so much of the weapons now are ideological. They kind of shot the wad with artillery and bombs in the First World Wars, which really wrecked Europe, kind of finally, at least physically. And now it's the struggle with the ideologies.
100%. Um, I need to let you get back to the farm and things like that, and we're heading into the fall, so I have just a couple more if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I learned so much from you when it comes to pigs. I mean, literally, we have the old spots because of you, your website. I reached out to you a couple of years ago asking if you still had some referrals, in the Pacific Northwest for breeders. We worked with one that we raised. And then last year, or this past, because we just have been doing weaners. This next
Yeah.
year will be our first round where we'll breed them together.
Right.
Um, and anyway, your connection. And then the second one, I don't even know if I ever told you this, but he said, "Hey, I reached out to him. Do you have wieners, old spots? I really want those. The family pig, it fits my heritage, the whole program." And I was really overselling it, probably.
Yeah.
And anyway, he said, "Well, I'm kind of thinking about getting out of it. In fact, if you want to come with this week, you can have what I have." So me and the butcher headed out. Yeah. Anyway, we ended up having a little bonus pork that this past year. I think it maybe was 2 years ago now. But anyways, your
Yeah.
referrals, your connection. So this is going to sound really dramatic, but I kind of fell in love with pigs thanks to the way that you discuss them and how you process them. And of course, all the beautiful, I had no problem eating pork for my entire life. And even when we lived in the suburbs in Issaquah, before we bought this farm 4.5 years ago, I was, buying a belly from Costco even and curing it myself. So I learned, and I was
Yeah.
doing it in the townhome. But now that we're raising it almost the whole program, I mean, I love these animals.
Yeah.
And so I want to give you a quote, and I want you to tell us, about your, again, dramatic because we're English majors, uh,
Yeah.
you know, uh, connection to the pig. Winston Churchill said, supposedly, "I like pigs. Dogs look up to us, cats look down on us, but pigs treat us as an equal." What tell me about old spots, about pigs in general, about Farmstead, Meatsmith, Oklahoma. Tell me your connection to these beautiful creatures.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great quote. And I think, you could look at it as again, if we're not immediately prejudiced against the idea of hierarchy, then you can see that there's a hierarchy even within the farm animals, on just around your home. And it's pretty clear, and it's related to the varying sense powers that they have, the varying degrees of faculties that they all have. And I love seeing that in my animals, like the sheep, I would add to Churchill's list, like the sheep, I'm a wolf, pretty much always. I've got one ewe that she's a little more comfortable with me, but the assumption is predator. We're gonna keep our distance from that guy. Goats, especially if you start to milk them, I think they look at you as a goat and they will follow you, especially if you do paddock rotations and you're, especially if you're milking them, you are the queen mother goat. And because that's in a goat herd, the head mama goat is kind of decides where everyone's going to browse, which is really important for goats amongst ruminants. They have to compile a perfect mix of plant matter, brown, green, and hard and tender in their gut to thrive. And if you're feeding goats, you're a goat. You're the queen mother goat, and they're going to follow you. Um, and I do agree, yeah, with pigs, they do look right at you, and I think that they especially the more that we domesticate them, they become truly amicable, like straight up friendly and
Mhm.
really pleasant to be around, which again is not a diminution, but an enhancement of their nature. It even gives them more joy in life, more happiness. Uh, and I would say, you see this especially with pigs where they really, really need company. They really need partnership to thrive on a basic natural level, which is all they've got to eat a lot, to be healthy, to grow at a good rate. They need company, either in another pig. And shockingly, it helps even if you have a lone pig. If you spend some time with them every day at feeding time, that absolutely will enhance their state in life. It will enhance their growth, guaranteed. So they all have reference to us, the farmer with reason on his farm, who they serve. And yeah, the pig for us has always been kind of the center and not of our farming, because it is very much the center of our cooking and what the abundance that the pig brings to the table, and how its fat and its flesh is mild enough to be used in everything, which is really what distinguishes it from beef and lamb, which are
100%.
wonderful. But the pig fat is mild. It's a humble, modest fat. It's prodigious. There's a lot of it. But it works with everything, and it's how you preserve everything. And that's why it's so fun to engage with particularly these heritage breed pigs, where because they have been divorced from the industrial setting, they're not bred for maximum lean meat production in the shortest amount of time. They're actually bred to be nice, to literally fit on the family farm with kids running around all the time, and to be a safe domestic companion on the farm.
The
And that's what.
the the concept, and that you've brought it up before, but just the family pig. I mean, it just wasn't that long ago, what, two, three, four generations ago max, where that just how it was. You mentioned Europe. I mean, you had one, maybe two pigs, and that's what fed your family for 6 to 12 months.
Yeah,
And so you needed something that was going to cooperate with your farm, with your other animals, with your children.
yeah,
And I just think that whole concept, there's something kind of romantic about it. There's something like very primitive also about it to me. Like, wow, if that thing doesn't make it or it gets sick or it gets out of we're in trouble, literally, as a
yeah,
family. We can't just zip down to QFC or some other grocery store and go kind of fill in the gap in our in our diet. And
yes,
so it has become it is our favorite. I mean, look, my wife went all carnivore to eat, like her diet. Well,
yeah,
I should say animal products. So she does a lot of raw dairy in the form of yogurt primarily. But
nice.
between the beef and the pigs, I mean, I don't know why more people don't want to do it. I mean, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of investment up front. But once you're into the rhythm, maybe it's
Yeah.
not liturgical, but it could be.
Well, I mean, they mark their calendars by the feasts of the year, and it's it's
Tell me
certain.
more about that, just real quick.
Yeah, I mean the it's a just pick your country in Europe. It's so rich. Like in Spain, the pig slaughter, all in the northern hemisphere, pig slaughter has always been of course, in the winter, and the because it's a refrigerator outside. And in Spain, it's the sacrificio. It's the sacrifice. That's what they call it.
Hmm.
And in all over Europe, even in England and yeah, English speaking mostly. I guess in England it was Martinmas. So Martinmas is November 11th. It's the feast of Saint Martin and Saint Martin of Tours. And it was when you slaughtered your animals, because on the British Isles, when it's after about November 11th, it's pretty reliably cool outside, which is perfect for harvesting your animals. And the earth is not producing a lot for you. The gardens are dying down. You're not. It's you're coming into the time of year when your primary source of nutriment of food is going to be bacon and ham. It's going to be meat. And so there was even a saying like everyone meets his Martinmas. And it used to be an octave. It was an 8-day feast. It was during that week when all the animals would be slaughtered, even cows, especially geese, because Saint Martin, like a good humble saint, was pursued. He didn't want to become bishop, but the people had to basically chase him down, which is one of the signs that you're a saint. I think if you flee promotion, and he tried, and he hid in a thicket, but there were some geese there, and they gave away his position, as you know, geese being loud,
Yep.
cackly creatures, and so they were able to find him and make him Bishop of Tours. But it was, yeah, the Feast of Saint Martin, definitely, and even in the Eastern calendar, like the Eastern Orthodox Church, the Feast of the Ignat, they called it, which is the beginning of December. I think it's our Feast of Saint John. That's when they would start slaughtering things at that time. And so it was all ordered by the liturgical calendar. And then, that's when, especially in the fall, when the geese by nature are prone to gorge themselves and fatten their livers for a migration, that's when you do the gavage, which gives you, or the foie gras, which gives you foie gras, which is very special. It's very hard to make, but it gives you foie gras for Christmas and coming later in spring in Easter, because it's a really special thing. So it's all laid out by the liturgical
It's
calendar.
already there. Yeah. And oh man, I mean, we could keep going on just that. I keep using the word rhythm, but I mean, if we just line up,
Mm,
right? So much of this stuff, all these decisions, like, what am I going to do about this or that or the other thing? It's like the decision's already been kind of made for you. If you
yeah,
follow it, there's probably some wisdom. In fact, there's tons of wisdom that goes into that. Somehow we've forgotten and we think our ancestors didn't know what they were doing. It's
yeah,
like they kind of followed this for a couple of reasons. Well, we have refrigeration. That's not the only reason. It
yeah,
helps, but you
yeah.
know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. I think that, well, and as an English major, you probably heard me say this before, but the limitation, I mean, that's the beginning of creativity in every sense. And I think especially in poetry, right?
Oh,
And
without question.
right, I mean, a sonnet, you know what a sonnet is: a 14-line poem with a prescribed rhyming scheme, a prescribed meter, 5 beats per line. They even got to be iambic beats. And even they prescribe the content. Like you got to develop a conflict and then you got to resolve it in 4 lines. Or if you're Shakespeare, two. And it's so prescribed. I think sonnet even means room. It's you're limited, you're bound in. And what happens when you write a sonnet is that you find that by actually limiting yourself and shoving yourself into that small space in the expression of your poetic conceit, you actually are able to compose something that was beyond your expectations. You didn't know that you had that in you because the limitation brought it out. It brought it out of you.
That's a
And
powerful metaphor, just in general. I mean, a principle, really,
yeah,
that we could draw inspiration from.
yeah,
Your last couple of episodes, I can't remember exactly his name. I want to say Bill Merton, but maybe it's not.
yeah,
The Sacred, let's see, Sacred Heart House, I think somewhere in the central part of the
yes,
country.
Mark Wharton, yeah,
Mark, sorry, Mark Wharton. I had it totally flipped. Anyway, he did a sonnet for you. So make sure I'm going to put a link to that note
yeah.
that people can look up for that. But that was fantastic.
Yes.
that he wrote one basically for the Sheard family and
Yeah.
your whole business around being a meatsmith and all that. I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, that
Well,
was great.
let me finish with this, Brandon. What was a couple of fun things? What's the last book you read or are
Uh,
reading?
okay. Well, I'm actually, oh man, I'm reading too many. The last book
Same.
I read cover to cover was The Public Life of Christ by Bishop Alban Goodyear, there's 3 volumes, 2 on the public life and 1 on the passion. Cannot recommend it enough. It is awesome. Bishop Alban Goodyear. And then for one of the books I'm reading right now is The Practice of Christian and Religious Perfection by Father Alphonsus Rodriguez,
Oh,
which
awesome.
it's awesome. It's so good. And he's got this huge section, on purity of intention, which just ties into exactly what we're talking about, how to actually make every act you perform, in the way of charity. If we're going to love God, the intention behind every single act, no matter how mundane, is for the glory of God. And that is because we can do acts out of fear, fear of punishment or whatever. We can exercise virtue out of fear of not experiencing the negative effects of bad actions, or we can have the intent of hope, where we hope for recompense, for a reward for doing a good job at our pig raising, or for exercising any virtue. But the perfect way, and the way that we're all called to, is the way of charity, which endures, right, for all eternity,
Right.
which is to actually pursue each act with the pure, the singular, the only intention of glorifying God, of the love of God. And that it again, that just reorders everything. It puts pleasure in your actions in the right place, as a supervening good, like a good that comes alongside a good act, but isn't the goal. It isn't the reason you do it. It's all for the glory of God. But that book is awesome. Super practical. It's very, very practical for lay people and religious. It's
I
awesome.
love it. I was going to ask you for a favorite inspirational quote, knowing that you had a whole library of them, but I feel that kind of covered it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Brandon, this has been an honor. It's been a pleasure. Uh, I could keep going. There could be all kinds of things that we could probably cover for sure. But where can people find out more information about what you guys are doing, your online community, your in-person community, all of that? Where can people get more information?
Yeah, so the way to get in touch with us would be farmsteadmeatsmith.com. And there you could just sign up for our newsletter, which we send out whenever we schedule classes, or if I'm ever speaking at any conference, like I'll be at the Ozarks Homesteading Conference in a couple weeks, not even a couple of weeks, a week and a half, and at another one in Missouri. And then we host hands-on classes here that are 3 days long. We harvest 2 Gloucester Old Spot pigs that I have raised, and we do it with a small group, just 8 people, and it's all peasant. It's all on the home scale, which is really what tastes the best. It's not dumbed down for the domestic version. That's actually what all the fancy pants chefs are trying to get back to, is the way our ancestors did it, literally in the backyard, because that's the best. That's the proper home of the pig. So we've got those classes. They're awesome, 3 days long. And then we also have the Meatsmith membership, which you can find, which is an archive of over 50 videos. And I hope to actually be adding a few more to that. And an active forum, a Facebook group, and monthly live chats. We get together and we document our domestic provisioning, the art of feeding ourselves on a domestic scale, from raising the animal, husbanding, all the way to slaughter and curing and cookery.
The Facebook and the forum community is such a vibrant part of what you guys are doing. I've gotten answers. Tried to answer a couple of things. I mean, just the back and forth all around the country, if not the world, of people bringing up things and getting other people's input is just really a cool way, or probably benefit to being a part of all this.
Yeah,
Brandon,
definitely.
this has been awesome, man. I appreciate it. and say hi to Lauren and your family. Again, just know that you guys have inspired a whole bunch of people. We hope you come back to Seattle again, the area sometime. I joked with we. Real sorry, this is off topic a little bit, but you know who Joel Salatin is, right?
Yeah.
So we met him a couple weeks back. We were at the Modern Homesteading conference in Coeur d'Alene, and we met him. And I was chatting with him as he was signing the book, and I said, "Hey, Seattle really misses you." And he stopped and he looked up at me and he goes, "I doubt it." you know, because he's a
Yeah.
little bit of a rebel or whatever. But
Yeah.
I'm sure people around here would love to have you back. So next time you're in, make sure you look us
Yeah.
up. But again, we just appreciate you guys, and God bless you and your family for sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. God bless you.
All right, take care.